we're ready to get going. I was very efficient and did name tags for the candidates who are here, but omitted to do my own name tag. So my name is John Pemberton. I'm the coordinator of the New Forest Green Party, and I'm going to chair this event. Broadly, the proposed structure is that each of the people on the stage, who are, by the way, and let me explain that just a little in case you're not fully au fait with that. My way of putting it is they're nominated to be candidates, to be MEP candidates for the MEP election, which is going to occur in 2014. So some way away, but this is a great opportunity to find out what their positions are on various issues, and I'm sure you're keen on doing that. And the way we can do it is to ask each of them, if they want to, and they don't have to, but just to say a maximum of 5 minutes about themselves. And having done that, we would then go into questions from the floor. We didn't want everybody to do their 5 minutes all in a row, because that would take quite a time, and then it would be quite a long time before you got an opportunity to ask questions. By all means, ask questions about anything they say, but anything you wish to ask questions about. We'll try and keep that to something like about 10 or 15 minutes, and then allow the next candidate to speak. So that's the proposed format.
I was on the impression that we were going to speak on a specific subject. I don't know if that's okay as well, if you'd rather we spoke about ourselves.
Well, what we don't have is any sort of brief resume. So what we might perhaps do is just ask you to say something very brief about yourself. If you keep that to 1 minute. Should we do that and go down the line initially, and then some people in the audience will have an idea what is the background of the people who are here. So we'll do that to start with. Before we do, I just wanted to suggest some ground rules for questions from the audience. We haven't got a huge number of people, so this might not be so necessary, and we can vary the rules depending upon the questions. But I've chaired some of these events before, and I think it's quite worthwhile to say to people that we want them to ask a question for an answer to come, and we'll go along the panel and see who wants to answer the question. And then if the person who's asked the question wants to put a supplementary point, all well and good, but not more than that, at least not at the time they ask the question. If we've got time at the end for people to go in more depth and things, and that is necessary, I think, to stop a dialogue which goes on for quite a long time and will exhaust the time we've got available for the meeting. So that's just a suggestion as a ground rule for the way we operate. So, with no more ado, I'm going to propose to do it in alphabetical sequence of surname. David, do you have just a brief 30 seconds to a minute of describing yourself?
When we're doing our 5 minutes, can you tell us 1 minute before we finish?
I will certainly do that.
Thank you. That would be very helpful.
David Ahern.
Hello, I'm David Ahern. I was the first chair of Brighton and Hove Ecology Party, and we later became Brighton and Hove Green Party about 8 years later. I fought East Sussex in the 1984 European elections for the Ecology Party, and subsequently I fought Eastbourne twice for the Green Party, and more recently I fought the my local seat in the general election. I've always been concerned about the environment, and particularly all the green issues concerning animal welfare, and I was married until I was widowed 4 years ago.
You've got 10 seconds left of your minute.
Thank you. And not really a lot to say about me. It's all in my piece that I put into the, which you'll get round with the voting papers. Thanks very much.
Do you want just a quick 1 minute introduction?
This is my 1 minute. Yeah, hello, my name's Bea Campbell. I'm a writer and broadcaster, and I've just finished a book and feel like I'm surfacing from a kind of dungeon, a solitary dungeon. Well, the only person I've been talking to is myself, which is called End of Equality. I've stood for the Green Party several times in my borough, Camden, in London, and I I think that's probably all I need to say to you for the moment.
Okay, Beverly.
I'm Beverly Golden. I'm a local. I live in Totton. I went to school in Totton. I'm a lawyer. I work in child protection. I have 2 sons who are now 18 and 19, so they're at a stage in life where, you know, I'm looking out for them, wondering how things are going to be for them in their adult life. We're fighting a by-election here in Totton at the moment. There's a vacancy in Totton South, and I'm standing as a candidate for the Green Party. I stood in the general election
10 seconds.
last time, and I was also on the list of Euro candidates for the last European Parliament elections.
Excellent. Miriam Kent.
I'm Miriam Kennett. I've been in the Green Party for 30 years, and I'm currently the local party support coordinator for the whole of the South East region. I'm part of the Environmental Change Institute at Oxford University, and I studied environmental change and management and law there at Oxford University. I've worked in France and Germany and Brussels, and I launched the European Greens European Parliament campaign right around Europe on the television in Brussels, and also the French Greens asked me to launch their campaign in the French Senate, which is a great honour, so that's really exciting. And I'm on the board of the European Network of Political Foundations and the Green European Foundation, which is very active, particularly against the right wing at the moment, and there's some literature on the table, some books I've read, and some stuff from those organisations.
Excellent. Andrea Claire Smith is not with us at the moment. We were expecting her, but she can introduce herself when she does arrive. And we have Alfie Sterling.
Hi, my name's Alfie Sterling. I'm a Green Party member in Lewis, just near Brighton. I currently volunteer in the National Press Office, working as a press officer. I've done that for about a year. I've been a Green Party member for about 2 years. I'm very active in my local constituency. I'm only standing in the county council elections, and I coordinate a strategy group in that Green Party as well. And I'm also studying economic and political history in London at King's College London.
Excellent. And Keith Taylor is we know is going to arrive late. So again, we can hear from him when he does arrive. So, yes, missing one. Do beg your pardon. He was one we were expecting from the outset, that he may have been delayed. Good, good.
They're just very transparent.
I didn't get the point.
You can see through them. They're very transparent.
I do beg your pardon. Well, indeed, they are exactly what they are, transparent. Well said. David, do you want to kick off? We're going to do this in alphabetical sequence, which I couldn't think of a better method of doing that. So you've got 5 minutes to speak on any subject you may wish.
Certainly. Well, there are many subjects on which I'm very concerned, which I would like to raise in the European Parliament. Coming immediately to the current financial crisis being faced by Greece and some of the other European countries, I think a lot of this comes from the fact that the banks have been responsible for this, and tragically the bailout of the economies is following a guideline set out by the banks, so that when these bailouts come, instead of going into the main exchequer, they're being handed out to the banks on their recommendation, and I find that very concerning. I want to see the creation of green jobs throughout Europe, and unfortunately in Britain we're killing off green jobs rather than supporting them. I'm very concerned about animal cruelty, and one of the things I would like to raise, I managed to get the ban through on performing animals in Brighton when I was a member of Brighton Council, and I would like to see no injury before slaughter to any animal anywhere in Europe, which would put an end to bullfighting, because that is appalling as sure, and no animal should be tortured before it's killed. I think that the feed-in tariffs for green energy should be Europe-wide, and that's something I'm very concerned about. I was horror-struck to hear that Cameron and Sarkozy had signed up to a nuclear power treaty between them to invest more money in nuclear energy rather than in sustainable alternatives, because nuclear energy is not sustainable as a direct result of leaking radioactive waste. The Germans have shelved all their plans for new nuclear power stations and are going totally green, thank God. But apparently France and England have other ideas, and yet there's no safe way of storing nuclear waste. I also would like to see an end to the funding of lobbyists within the European Parliament. I think that's utterly ridiculous. Commercial organisations can place lobbyists in Brussels and have them paid for by the European Parliament, which is a total waste of money. If people want to lobby, that should be at their own expense, not at anyone else's, not at ours. And you get lobbyists polling for things on the most appalling issues, which are really quite unsuitable, and they're purely for commercial interests, and I would like to see an end to that immediately. I've written for the Mail on Sunday on environmental issues, and I've recently submitted an article on saving energy, which is a huge waste of electrical energy throughout Britain, and I've recently written a feature on that, which I hope will either be published in The Guardian or The Mail. I'm very dedicated to green issues. I have been all my life. I went vegetarian when I was 3½, because of the appalling slaughter of animals, which I couldn't cope with. Then I was brought up by, not a vegetarian, but my mother was a great humanitarian and went down and campaigned of Poplar against the slaughter of all the cart horses which were being killed at that time at the Knackers yards down there. I think anyone who's heard me speak before knows where I'm coming from, and as I say, I'm one of the founders of the Green Party. I gave up a safe Conservative seat on Brighton Council in 1979 to join the Green Party, because I felt that was so important, the most important issue of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. What we're going to do, David, what did I say? I do apologize, David. What we're going to do now is have a question session. Please do ask David any questions you want of him specifically, but also any other questions. What we'll do is we'll try and limit it to 15 minutes. So we may be okay. It may not run that long, and then we can have the second speaker. But we'll try and limit it, and then after the first speaker, after the questions, we can have the second speaker. Yes, can people hear all right? Yes. There is a microphone, although we'd have to hunt it out and turn the amplifier on and all that. So if you can hear, if you can't, just sing out and maybe we can raise our voices.
I'm John Vivian, I'm a Green Party member and I'm quite supportive.
You're Vivian?
I'm from Fareham, I support by-elections, fighting against the enemy, free monkeys as they're calling. I've got a serious question. This is one that affects a lot of people in our areas because we have a bit of fishing in this area. Can you, Jamie, and especially everybody else, can you explain the present European fishery policy and how fishermen can adopt to it? Or adapt to it? Can any of you explain the European fishery policy as it stands at the moment and how fishermen can adapt to it?
David, do you want to say that?
Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you and say that I have read the European fisheries policy and I didn't understand it. So I can't really know. I'm terribly sorry. It's very hard to follow the fisheries policy, and unfortunately, it doesn't do anything to prevent overfishing, and that's the worst thing of all.
Does anyone else have a comment about it on the panel? Beverly.
What I'd like to say about the fisheries policy is, to my mind, it's totally wrong that something like, I think it's over 95% of the licences for fishing are given to the big factory ships, and only less than 5% of the licences are given to small local fishermen. The problem we have is not with local fishermen from local ports going out to catch fish for their local communities. It's these huge ships that come along and hoover up huge amounts of fish. And it's all to do with the free market, of course, and massive companies with massive capital behind them, and massive influence. being able to get the licences. That's what needs to change. We need to bring it back to much smaller scale farming.
Can I come back a moment?
Yes.
Very quick.
Briefly.
One of the things that always concerned me is the fact that with the fish they want, they take up and kill an awful lot of other fish, which is terribly cruel, because once you put a fish out of the water, its air sac bursts, and it's as good as dead then. And unfortunately, we see this particularly, as Beverly was saying, about these great ships that hoover up the fish. They're taking everything. And it also means that when the ones with the huge nets, the trawlers, go along, they take in occasionally sea turtles, dolphins, all sorts of things which are killed. The fishing industry is incredibly cruel, and I'm totally opposed to it anyway. Plus, of course, there's also the aspect that nobody thinks about the heavy metals which are now present in the sea and which are so lethal to humanity. Things like mercury, for example, which is a deadly poison. Major concern. Should we be eating fish in the sea?
Miriam, I know, wants to say a word.
Well, I just want to say, I did a speech, can't see there. I did a speech quite recently at the Marine Department, Oceanography at Southampton here. And they called me in to talk about, I don't know if you know that place, it's very, very interesting. They called me in to talk about ecosystem services, which some of you may be aware of. So this is the idea and the basis of a lot of what's coming out of Europe at the moment, which is the idea that there's services to the economy provided by nature. Now, it's really quite interesting, and whilst it's better to know what the value of nature is, the idea behind ecosystem services is that you maximise the benefit to the economy. But the trouble is that the benefit to the sea and the marine environment and the fish is not necessarily, of course, the same as the benefit to the human economy and making a profit. And you'll find, I don't know if you know this, but there's been a climate report, of course, by Stern. You probably know about that, Stern Review. But there's an equivalent one about biodiversity called the TEEB report. That's T-E-E-B. And you might like to go home and look that up. And that was organised by UNEP. A person called Pavan Sukhdev led that in Geneva. And that was totally based on this idea of ecosystem services. And the people at the Oceanography Department at Southampton were really worried about this idea that you basically only see the environment, you only see fish and other species there for your benefit, for profit, rather than perhaps something that you might need to eat if you eat fish, or you might need to have an intrinsic value. You want to make sure the marine environment is healthy, but that is not the same as ecosystem services. So I would argue that what's going on at the moment, if you like, the theory behind all this, is that profit takes the place of the benefit of the rest of us and other species. And so I think a really important green economic aspect to this is to ensure that our fisheries policy is sustainable for our children, our grandchildren, the 7th generation, and make sure the rights of the sea and everything that's in it are looked after.
Excellent. Alfie, did you want to?
Yeah, just a bit. I mean, basically, I really agree with everything that's been said. But I want to add one further point, and that was that there's one particularly nasty aspect of the European fishing policy, which is that you have quotas for different species of fish, and once you've overfished a certain species, it can no longer sell beyond that quota. But of course, a fishing net is indiscriminate. It just rakes in any species, all in any species. And if you are under quota on a certain species, you can pick them out of the net and you can sell them. But if you're over quota, or maybe fished cod on a different trip, you have to chuck back every single one of the cod you've caught, which of course by the time it's suffocated and died. And so it's not just the fact that you've got these, all these different other best interests and capitalist interests which are affecting the way in which we fish the seas. It's the fact that we've also got these mad rules that mean that we're wasting huge volumes of perfectly good fish, which actually would be better off alive anyway, but since they haven't, we can't even eat them ourselves.
Okay, please.
I want to say two things in response to your question, which is a really important one for an island like this, which once had a fishing industry, once had a relationship to the waters, and now scarcely does. And the two things are this. First, I think that the green approach is the only approach that's worth even thinking about in Europe and in the UK. It's the only one that starts from a relationship to what's in the sea, what the sea is for, why a relationship, in other words, to the sea itself, rather than the sea merely as a resource to be exploited. It's the only party that any of us are ever likely to be able to vote for that starts from that position. So I would absolutely affirm that, and I think we should just be proud that that's where our starting point is. The second thing I want to say is that the more I think about it, the more it feels like fishing industries have become like banks. They're unregulated, they're unpatrolled, they're desperately, dangerously greedy. They will bring the thing that they're supposed to be interested in, fish, to the point of extinction, regardless. So there's a kind of recklessness about this industry. And I think we can read the fishing industry increasingly in the way that we now confidently read the banking industry. What's absolutely vital is that we reinvigorate the means by which we patrol and protect the seas. And we are as bad as anybody. You know, we lament Spanish fishermen and Norwegian fishing boats and all of this. And actually, we've just had a massive case in the north of Scotland, which has exposed the majority of the industrialised fishing industry in Scotland as being corrupt, in the most extraordinarily sophisticated ways corrupt, and dangerous. Europe is a context in which we can address that, confidently address that. That means some discipline for us in Britain. It seems to me it's the only context that gives the seas around us a chance.
Okay, we have been joined by Jonathan Essex. What we've been doing, Jonathan, is allowing everyone to give a short 1-minute introduction to themselves. This is not the 5-minute one we're going to do later, but just to say who you are and where you're from. So if you wanted to do that then, and then if you wanted to reply on this question of fisheries,
only if possible to hear the question again.
Why don't you give your 1 minute just on who you are, and then ask the question as a question, ask the question again.
Okay. Who I am, I'm Jonathan Essex. I'm a Green Councillor in Redhill. Just been waylaid by the trains here today. I'm a long-term green-leaning person, always been interested in Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, but I work in the construction industry. And how did I marry that? Well, I did both for a long time, and then that took me to Bangladesh in 2005, and I lived through a 1 in 10 year monsoon and became convinced that climate change isn't just an issue for polar bears, it's an issue that affects people. It will affect people the other side of the world far sooner than it will us here. Probably not say much more than that now, except I'm standing with the others on this panel and others for the European election selection with the Green Party. I would like to see the Green Party move forward and offer not just the solutions, but the hope and the motivation that we can get to a different future. And only we together will deliver that for people.
Okay. Do you want to repeat the question, and Jonathan might...
Yeah, the question, Jonathan, was can you explain the present European fishery policy and how fishermen can adapt to it?
You don't have... Not everybody's answered every question.
Right. All I say is...
We can give you time to think about it and come back to the point later.
Well, maybe just to say in summary, I don't think we should be asking the fishermen to adapt the current policy. We should be looking to make those policies better. We should be looking, instead of what we currently have in the European Union, which is a policy, as Bea set out, which benefits large corporate interests and turns the fishing industry into yet another industry, rather than something which has a real focus and desire to protect the seas and the fish, to recreate the possibility that fishermen might have livelihoods. Those livelihoods might be interconnected with the fish in which they live, and that those would be existing in small villages and small places up and down the UK around our coastline, rather than just a few places where you have very large vessels which exploit both the fish and remove the possibility of other people having a sustainable livelihood at the same time.
Okay. There was a second question here.
Can I go back to David? Who was supposed to ask questions about diversity rather than diversifying. I'm Donald Johnson. I'm a ex-public servant, retired public servant. I've got no alliances to any party. I don't belong to a party. I think I voted UK skip the last 2 elections, just because I want to be out of Europe. But anyway, David, I agree with you with the policy that Germany got with running down the nuclear power stations and stuff like that. It's worrying for me that actually the French have got nuclear reactors all along the French coast, and they actually control a lot of our power companies, power utility companies. It's worrying for me for that case. And there was no program on the television about 3 months ago that said, I think it's Dungeness that's getting deassembled. It's taken about 20 years, and the threat to nuclear will be 100 years. But you know, the pollution. I agree with you totally. I think that before we embark on it, I know David Cameron's been talking to somebody this week about nuclear reactors. We talked to the French. Before we even start on that, I would think it's just got to go to a referendum. Do you agree? You know, whether we go on to a new scheme of nuclear reactors.
David, please.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
Sorry, that's my accent probably. I get nervous and I go back to me.
So I was trying to hear you and I couldn't, I'm sorry.
Do you think we should have a referendum whether we adopt a new policy of going on to new nuclear reactors?
On nuclear reactors?
I think it's important for all the people involved.
Absolutely. I think we need to do the same as the Germans and completely phase out nuclear power because it's so dangerous. It's like holding a tiger by its tail. You never know when it's going to turn around and bite you. And we're leaving a lethal legacy for future generations in the atomic waste. We can't control it ourselves now, and we're hoping, against hope, that future generations will be able to. But it's, as I say, a lethal legacy. And the Germans, as I said earlier, have now found that with all their technology, which is vastly superior to our own, their nuclear waste is already leaking and contaminating the water sources around where it's stored. They're very careful, of course, and we're not. We just put in a hole in the ground. We can forget about it in an old coal mine or something. But and of course, we've already dumped an awful lot of nuclear waste in the Atlantic Trench, and in containers which have a maximum life of 100 years because they're concrete, and concrete hardens for 50 years and decays for 50 years, and after that it starts to break up. And I'm deeply concerned about nuclear waste. What I would like to see is, rather than wind power, which is not the ideal thing because it does kill bats that fly into the sails, I would like to see us devote...
David, could I ask you just to summarise, because we do have a lot of people to speak.
I'm almost there.
Okay.
I'm almost there. What I would like to see is us devoting research into